we're going to start the webinar. We have an interesting topic today. We have literature as a creative industry. But remember, at PIDE, our focus is always economics. So we want to see how we can make money. We are very, very greedy people. So we want to see how we make money. So Musharraf Farooqi is here with us, well-known author, well-known storyteller. So inshallah, we'll talk to him. Hussain is here, also an author, wrote a book on Pakistan, a fashionable history of Zuka, which is interesting. We learn about it. Then we've got Shandana Minhas, also an author and a storyteller. So we've got 3 authors.
And a publisher.
And a publisher? Okay. Musharraf is also. Musharraf is, both are publishers too. Okay, great. Okay, guys, so we are very interested to hear from you. Tell us, a warrant, Musharraf Sahab. We have no book industry in Pakistan. We have no readership in Pakistan. मैं जब जाता हूँ, बहुत सारी जगहों में जाता हूँ लोगों से बातें करने के लिए. मैं बच्चों से पूछता हूँ, सिविल सर्वेंट से पूछता हूँ, जर्नलों से पूछता हूँ. मुझे सब कहते हैं हमने पढ़ना छोड़ दिया, हम पढ़ते ही नहीं और पढ़ने की जरूरत ही नहीं क्योंकि अब हमारे पास सेल फोन है. So how do you justify your existence?
We actually do have a huge book industry. If you look at the figures, paper import figures, you will know what kind of industry we have. Karachi के अंदर आप कभी book publishers उनके ऑफिस में जाएं तो वो रहा होता है कि अच्छा 50 करोड़ का पेपर लेकर रख लो, 30 करोड़ की लॉट आ गई है वो लेके रख लो. And these are not mega publishers. These are middle-sized publishers, but they have most of their market is religious literature, which is fine, which is historically the case. In Indo-Pak subcontinent में 2 तरह का हमेशा से literature बिका है. एक religious literature और दूसरा जो आपके शायरी है, किस्से हैं, कहानी है, दास्तान है. So both of them have had a huge market, but we now are in a position where most of the literature that we not produce as much as the market or sell is religious literature because it's heavily subsidized by different interest groups, and we are in a position where we have slowly eliminated all kind of creative literature, which introduces us to new ideas, new emotions, and connects us to a wider world. Because storytelling traditions are not very limited; they are international in their scope. So we are in a position where most of what we read is very narrowly focused on how we should behave, how we should act, how we should carry out our affairs with the view of the hereafter. Lekin what makes us human, what makes us creative beings is not that much part of our life. And
Meher Bibi, let me bring in Meher Bibi. Meher Bibi, मुझे बताइए जो भी कहा है मुशर्रफ साहब ने, बड़ी अच्छी बात की कि हमारी डिमांड जो है वो रिलीजियस लिटरेचर की है, हमारी डिमांड उस साइड की है. तो इसमें कसूर क्या आप लोगों का जो राइटर्स हैं, क्या आप उनको सप्लाई नहीं कर रहे enough material that affects their life so that you compete with the other side? After all, बाकी दुनिया में बहुत रिलीजियस लिटरेचर की डिमांड है, ठीक है. I mean, अमेरिका में बहुत रिलीजियस लिटरेचर की डिमांड है, यूरोप में भी, but there is a competing business that is run by people like you. तो ये फेलियर किसका है यहाँ? बाकी जो मुशर्रफ साहब कह रहे हैं पेपर की डिमांड है, पेपर की डिमांड तो है, टेक्स्ट बुक बहुत बड़ा पेपर डिमांड करता है, ज़ाया भी करता है. तो मेहर बीबी बताइए क्या ख्याल है आपका?
जी, अस्सलाम वालेकुम नदीम साहब, thank you so much for this forum, it's much needed. मुशर्रफ साहब ने जो बातें की हैं बिल्कुल दुरुस्त की हैं. As an author and a publisher myself, I feel that the onus lies on the publishers and the writers. Now, you see, writers in Pakistan have traditionally written non-fiction which is related to politics or there's some strategic lens to it. And that market is pretty much saturated. The fact that you have to look at the country, the nation, to see that what use, what good has all that literature done speaks volumes of how saturated the market is. People have stopped reading it because they're fed up. So then we come to the writer's side. Now, Pakistani authors, whether fiction or non-fiction, they have traditionally found it very difficult to find representation abroad. So what they used to do is they would go to India. With the books ban in place, the Indian market has been cut off. So locally, where do local authors go? The publishing industry is a complete wasteland. There is absolutely no infrastructure there to support authors, to give them a royalty, to have sales figures that can encourage them to write further, to have platforms where their work is appreciated and commended. What do publishers like Musharraf Saab or even Shandana Saiba, who's one of the first publishers to have made a difference, a dent in the publishing industry, is that it comes down to us to invest with our own money, which, by the way, none of us are exactly flush with cash here. So whatever income that we get, we are putting into this. Whatever funding we get, we're putting into this. And there's very, very little left for us as publishers. But of course, we have to do the right thing. We have to give authors the royalties as well. So what I'd like to say is, Nadeem Saab, ultimately it comes down to people, civilians, readers. Why don't people read Pakistani books? Why aren't people supporting Pakistani writers? Why aren't we, as writers, as publishers, being given platforms where our work is showcased compared to international ones? I'm not saying international authors and publishers should not be getting access to our work or coming to Pakistan. By all means, they should. But where are the marginalized publishers? Musharraf Saab is absolutely right. There's a huge demand for paper because there's a textboard vote, but there are also publishers who are working with regional languages. One never sees their reviews in mainstream publications, and one never hears of them coming to fancy festivals. There has to be a concerted effort of all parties to come together.
बीबी मैं ये पूछूं, जो मुझे याद पड़ता है बचपन में, उर्दू डाइजेस्ट वाज अ बिग फ्रेंचाइज. However, it was a big franchise, ठीक है ना? And they published things, Full Risala or your वो थे. So Shandana, what happened? Where is your failure then? Shandana Bibi.
Your mic is...
Push your buttons ताकि थोड़ा सा discussion.
Yes, I've unmuted myself. So I tend not to think of things in such antagonistic terms. I don't think it's an either or failure success model that we're looking at. But if you'd like me to use economic terminology, I will. The problem here is that we have a massive market, but we have a risk-averse market. So we have, and I would also differentiate between the printing industry and the publishing industry. So in Karachi, for example, as Musharraf rightly pointed out, there is a huge printing industry, right? And the market is for religious literature. That's because it's risk-averse. It won't touch anything else. And it won't touch anything else for various reasons, among them legislation, which can open anybody up to any kind of, case. The first book that I published as a publisher, the second, sorry, was a book of science fiction called The Light Blue Jumper, which was about a little blue alien lost in space. And to get that printed in Karachi, I had to give my printer an affidavit that said that there is nothing in this book that will offend anybody's sensibilities, religious or otherwise. And I had to basically take an undertaking in terms of what I was putting my name on as a publisher. Because in Pakistan, you do have to put your name, as in any place, on the books that you publish. So I think the first thing is that we're using two different terms interchangeably. We're using printing and we're using publishing. Publishing as an industry involves other things like editing, book design, layout, graphics, etc., etc. So वो एक अलग बात है, that's a different set of conditions that we can discuss. And then we're talking about printing, which is the simple act of paper and the machines and running that as a business model. So what specifically are you asking us about? Because as a writer, I mean, neither of those things are things that I think about when I sat down to actually write something. So if you could specify exactly.
I'm asking about this very simple question. KG, books यहाँ बिकती नहीं है? Books.
नहीं, किताबें बहुत बिकती हैं. और तो फिर मेरा अगला सवाल आपसे होगा कि आपने ये सवाल किससे पूछा? Because अभी आप कह रहे थे when you were a child you read this digest, that digest. So there are still women's digests in Pakistan that sell massive quantities. We're talking about 500,000, 250,000, 700,000. बहुत बिकती हैं, बच्चों के लिए रसाले बिकते हैं, बहुत चीज़ें बिकती हैं. कराची बुक फेयर होता है, it has again massive sales. So children's literature and religious literature still sell in massive quantities. What if you are talking about English language writing in English, that's a tiny market which gets a disproportionate amount of attention. And I actually feel embarrassed talking about it because I think, as Meher said, regional languages में और इतने literature हैं हमारे मुल्क में कि उनकी अगर थोड़ी ज़्यादा बात हो तो बेहतर होगा. And I would defer to Musharraf's experience on that.
Great, मुशर्रफ साहब बताएं, बड़ी अच्छी इन्होंने बात की है. Elaborate on this.
नदीम साहब देखिए, पहले भी हमारी बात होती रही है कि क्या पब्लिशिंग में क्या है, किस तरह how this whole thing works and what are the problems. So the biggest problem is the generation of demand. Now, generation of demand is a policy thing. I can create demand for a storybook that I publish for children by going to schools, by telling the story, by telling bits from it, by getting children excited, by getting them to buy it. But that kind of direct sales model can only go so far. Asal cheez hoti hai ki, are we as a society invested in literature? This is the question. Are we as a society thinking that maybe stories are important for us, for our emotional well-being, for our mental well-being, as things that contribute something to our emotional and mental health? I'll give you an example. We have launched the Getz Pharma Library of Urdu Classics recently. I'll make just quickly over that in a bit. लेकिन उसमें जब मैं किस्सों को ट्रांसलेट कर रहा था तो किस्सा और दास्तानें जो हमारे यहाँ हैं, they have a very material function. किसी को किस्सा सुनाया जाता है, अगर उसकी तबीयत खराब है तो उसकी तबीयत बेहतर हो जाएगी. उसका there is a qissa, the qissa of Adar Shah and Saman Rupano. Usme the whole qissa is about a princess is sick and two narrators are there narrating stories to her and checking through weak plotting के उसने वो चीज पकड़ ली या नहीं पकड़ी. अच्छा, उसका दिमाग इतना बेहतर हो गया है कि उसने ये चीज पॉइंट आउट कर ली या नहीं. And slowly, with engagement that the patient has with the story, with the characters and with the plot, the patient recovers until she is fully healthy. दूसरा किस्सा है, उसके अंदर ये है कि आपको बताया जा रहा है कि दुनिया में आपको क्या काम करना है और क्या नहीं करना है. It has a pedagogical intent, लेकिन that pedagogy is very human centric. उसमें उसको चार वो उसमें lesson outcomes निकाल के नहीं देने, वो सिर्फ बता रहा है कि if you are boastful then these things can happen to you. एक और चीज है उसके अंदर आपको बता रहा है कि आप दुनिया में किस तरह रहना चाहिए. लेकिन everything is guised in the form of stories. तो ये वो चीजें हैं which stories give us, which we have forgotten. तो अब अगर हम as a policy decision, if the policy makers decide कि यार इसको हमको अपनी कहानियों की डिमांड जनरेट करनी है, और कहानियों के पॉलिसी वालों को इससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता कि जी आपकी इमोशनल वेलबींग क्या कैसी है, आपकी मेंटल वेलबींग कैसी है. पॉलिसी वालों को चाहिए फिगर्स के यार से इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ कैसी होगी, राइट? तो आप उनको बताएं कि इफ यू हैव योर ओन कंटेंट, इफ यू हैव योर इंडिजिनस कंटेंट दैट यू कैन develop, yeah, which is pre-existing and you just have to curate it, you can have a huge roaring entertainment industry feeding the performing arts, feeding the whole entertainment sections, media through these stories.
ये आ तो गई है, टीवी तो हमारा आजाद हो गया है और टीवी बहुत कमर्शियल हो गया, उस पे चीजें आती हैं और कंटेंट जो है ट्रेडिशनल कंटेंट अर्तुगरुल टाइप पूरी दुनिया में बिकता है. तो फिर प्रॉब्लम क्या है इसमें? हुकूमत को आने की क्या जरूरत है? क्यों नहीं आपके हम टीवी या जियो टीवी वगैरह ये
आप देखें, अर्तुगरुल के अंदर हुकूमत आई है और उसको एक्सप्लॉइट किया जा रहा है और उसको एक एजेंडा के थ्रू उसको पुश किया जा रहा है. उसके अंदर आप अपनी कहानियों के बारे में आपने कभी बात नहीं की. आपको एक वायलेंट किस्म का वो चाहिए नैरेटिव कि भाई वो है, उसने उसका सर उड़ा दिया, उसने उसको जाके मार दिया. Why are we constantly talking about violent encounters in storytelling? हमारी हर चीज तक महदूद होकर रह गई है. And this is the problem with policy. We have a policy, but that policy is going in a very warped direction. We need a more benign policy, literature की value or storytelling, whether it's done through cinema, whether it's done through TV, whether it's done through writing or publishing, is something good for humans. उसका एक खास मकसद नहीं है कि आप एक नेशनलिस्टिक एजेंडा उससे पुश हो रहा है, आपका ह्यूमनिस्टिक एजेंडा उससे पुश होना चाहिए।
तो मेहर बीबी, हमें पॉलिसी, मैं नहीं एग्री करता कि हमें पॉलिसी की जरूरत है या सपोर्ट की जरूरत है। क्यों नहीं हमारे राइटर्स और हमारे जो मीडिया है ये अपना नैरेटिव खुद क्यों नहीं लिख सकती? व्हाई डू दे नीड अ पॉलिसी सपोर्ट? जी मेहर बीबी।
जी नदीम साहब, हमारे राइटर्स अपना नैरेटिव बिल्कुल लिख रहे हैं, बल्कि इसी साल बहुत सारे पाकिस्तानी ऑथर्स आए हैं जिन्होंने बहुत दिलचस्प और खूब किताबें लिखी हैं, चाहे वो फिक्शन की हो या नॉन फिक्शन की हो। मसलन के अवैस खान साहब है जिनको अभी अवार्ड मिला है अपनी किताब के लिए। सफीना दानिश इलाही पब्लिशर हैं कराची में, उन्होंने बहुत सारा लिटरेचर वलैत से, अमेरिका से वो लेकर आई हैं पाकिस्तानी ऑथर्स के लिए। तैयबा अब्बास साहिबा हैं इधर लाहौर में, शी इज़ ऑल्सो पब्लिशर, उनकी भी किताब निकल रही है पाकिस्तानी फोकलोर के बारे में। मेरी अपनी जो किताबें हैं हमने यही सोसाइटल इश्यूज टैकल किए हैं थ्रू फिक्शन एंड नॉन फिक्शन। मसला जो आ रहा है, जिस मेरे ख्याल से मुशर्रफ साहब जो बात कर रहे हैं पॉलिसी की, वो बहुत ज़रूरी है। फॉर एग्जांपल आप देख लें पाकिस्तान अकेडमी ऑफ लेटर्स को देख लें। When was the last time मुशर्रफ साहब, शांदाना साहिबा, myself, कोई भी पाकिस्तानी author, when was the last time Pakistan Academy of Letters extended a hand of support, or they showed any interest in any of our work, or they said कि जी we are doing this, ये हम जी एक event कर रहे हैं तो आप भी आएं, आप कोई बात करें। जब से बैन लगा है किताबों पे, पाकिस्तान अकेडमी ऑफ लेटर्स ने कोई अपॉर्चुनिटीज खोली है लोकल राइटर्स के लिए? चले हम तो अर्बन एरियाज में हैं, हम पे तो ठप्पा लग जाता है कि जी आप तो एलीट है, आपको तो जरूरत नहीं है। चले ठीक है, इंडिजिनस राइटर्स के लिए क्या है? बार बार पाकिस्तान अकेडमी ऑफ लेटर्स उन्हीं लोगों को लाता है जो उनके पुराने कोई 10-20 साल है। तो जाहिर बात है नदीम साहब, लोग तंग आ जाएंगे कि वही किताबें, वही शक्लें, वही राइटर्स, वही लोग आ रहे हैं। पहला मसला ये। दूसरा मसला जो है, आप मुझे बताएं नदीम साहब, as an economist, let's talk numbers. I'm an independent publisher. I don't have any funding. I don't have any corporate sponsorship. Whatever I earn from my 9-to-5 job, after I'm done with the household, the bills, schools, everything, whatever little I have left over, I'm investing into this publishing business. Now, I publish a book and I go and I get minimum, like Shandana Sahiba very correctly said, कि जी English market इतनी छोटी, it's pitiful. It's pitiful. You sell 500 books, you are considered a national bestseller in Pakistan. 500 books. Now, if I were to go and stock at Liberty Books, Readings, any other books, Mr. Books है वो क्या है, सईद बुक बैंक है, कहीं भी जाऊं, आप मुझे बताइए, जहां पे मुझे बताया जा रहा है कि जी you will be charged a commission rate of 40 to 54%. Let me repeat that again. 40 to 54% per book. I've already made a loss. I can't even afford to pay my author a royalty. तो आप मुझे बताएं, why would I stock? Yes, of course, marketing के तौर पे, PR के तौर पे, presence के तौर पे, it makes sense कि जी stock accessibility वगैरह सारा कुछ होना चाहिए, लेकिन economically it doesn't make sense. So I'm not going to stock. And जब तक लोगों के पास access नहीं होगी किताबों की, जब तक लोगों के पास वो visibility नहीं होती किताबों की, लोग कैसे जानेंगे जी किताब, क्या किताब छपी जा रही है, किसके बारे में है, क्या topic है, कौन ऑथर है, कौन से नए पब्लिशर्स हैं? It just doesn't add up. 40 to 54% is criminal. I would like to know, I would like to ask the government to stage an intervention, at least ask for transparency. What is this 40% being charged for? What is this 54% being charged for? I know it, but does the Minister of Culture know it? No, he doesn't.
But tell me, what does Border Books in America or Barnes and Nobles charge? I'm sure they're charging a lot. ठीक है?
No, they're not. They're not charging this much. They charge a flat rate of 30%. Some of us have done our research, but it's definitely less than 45% or 54%.
I don't know this market, so I won't. ठीक है? अच्छा, वो जो वलायत में है, क्या नाम है वो जो ब्लैक या जो भी है वो कंपनी WH Smith, वो कितने चार्ज? आफ्टर ऑल ये जरूरी है कि जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर लगाता है वो पैसे तो चार्ज करता है, ठीक है। पर शंदाना बीबी बताइए,
जरूर
आप
करें, बाय ऑल मीन्स हर किसी ने खाना है, लेकिन आप हमें कोई ट्रांसपेरेंसी भी दीजिए। अगर आप 40% कर रहे हैं तो आप मुझे बताइए किस लिए कर रहे हैं। अगर आप 54% कर रहे हैं तो वो 54% किस लिए है?
तो मुझे बताइए शंदाना, Why, let me ask you guys a question, please बताइए कि आप लोग डायरेक्ट डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन क्यों नहीं कर सकते? Why can't you form a publishers cooperative and do something? मतलब I think all I'm trying to figure out is there are lots of responses जो markets खुद create करती हैं। एक तो आप बिल्कुल ठीक है कि इंग्लिश बुक्स तो जीरो है, बिल्कुल ठीक है ना, उनका फायदा कोई नहीं पब्लिश का। तो शंदाना बीबी, व्हाट इज योर बेस्ट सेलर और कितनी कॉपीज आपने छापी और कितनी बिकी?
You know, if I told you that, I would possibly have to do very drastic things and never write a book again. So I don't think I'm going to answer that question. Like I said, I write in English, and my figures are completely embarrassing. So let's not go there, Nadeem Saab. But if you don't mind, I'd like to answer the questions that you asked before.
Sure.
The first was, you know, you said that I don't think there's any need for policy. I absolutely agree with you. There is no need for policy. The problem is the existing policy. I don't know if you read the Copyright Act of Pakistan, which is what would govern, anything if you choose to publish something. It's worth a read. Within it, it has so many deterrents to any kind of creative expression कि वो इंसान पढ़ के ही ना लेट जाए और कभी उठे ना कि, you know, why are we opening ourselves to all of this? The second thing is that we don't need policy. We need removal of policy, and simultaneously we need accurate data collection. We don't have any data collection. This also goes to your question about why people don't invest. Why would somebody invest in something they have no data on, right? So a business will look at things like, what would my possible returns be on this? Earthagol, for example, which you were talking about earlier, it's got the numbers across the world to prove that it has a market. You don't have data collection in Pakistan. There's no central regulatory authority which will tell you what the market looks like. So unfortunately, right now we exist in a sort of cloud-like environment where we don't even know where our noses are. And again, this is me speaking as somebody who started a small press to publish books that already were probably liable to not find publishers because of the nature of the books themselves. But as a writer, I again agree with you. I don't need a policy to write. If as a writer, I don't need anybody's permission. I'll just go ahead and do it. But again, wo alag baat hai na, from being published or being adapted into television or cinema. So again, going back to Akhbar-e-Khawateen and Women's Digest and writers like Umaira Ahmed, etc., who have huge markets, they are being adapted for television. And businesses are investing in those writers for those reasons. So yeah, let's start with accurate data collection. And then I think this would be easier for us to find solutions to. Am I frozen?
No, we can hear
okay.
you.
Okay, so then the final thing I wanted to say was I wanted to just pick up something that Musharraf said last time, which was the value of stories themselves. So essentially, stories are value capsules, right? Stories are how societies form and cohere, and they decide who they are. And that is why in Pakistan, which is still in the process of forming an idea of itself, stories are even more important than, you know, I'm not thinking about Barnes and Noble or W.H. Smith. That is not my problem. I mean, मैं पाकिस्तानी हूँ, मेरे बच्चे पाकिस्तानी हैं, तो मुझे सिर्फ इस market की फिक्र है. And here he's absolutely right in that if we ever go in the direction of touching upon policy, we should think about what we are doing to ensure that the values we would like to inculcate in our children and in our future generations are being communicated to them through stories, because stories are the ways in which children understand the world.
But Musharraf Sahab, I'm sorry, I still have to disagree a little and provoke you guys. मुझे बताइए, जब पेरेंट्स नहीं चाहते बच्चे पढ़े, जब उस्ताद नहीं चाहते बच्चे पढ़े, जब पूरी सोसाइटी, मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ, मैंने अभी पेशावर में था, मैंने 500 बच्चों के साथ सारी यूनिवर्सिटी में कॉन्फ्रेंस कराई. जब मैंने पूछा आप कौन सी किताब पढ़ रहे हैं, लोगों ने कहा हम नहीं पढ़ रहे. ये खुल के बच्चे कहते हैं. जब मैं सिविल सर्विस एकेडमी गया पढ़ाने या NSPP गया, मैंने कहा हाथ खड़ा करो, कौन? मैं बहुत जगह पूछता हूँ हाथ खड़ा करो.
नदीम साहब, इन बच्चों की उम्र क्या थी जिनको आप बच्चे कह रहे हैं?
ये यूनिवर्सिटी 25-26 साल.
हाँ, तो बालिग हजरात. जी,
जी बिल्कुल बिल्कुल। तो बताइए फिर where does the fault lie? मतलब इन द सेंस कि हम ये ना कहें कि डोंट ब्लेम द कंज्यूमर, कंज्यूमर तो नहीं पढ़ना चाहता, तो आप लोगों की जरूरत क्या है हमें?
नहीं, this is completely wrong, Nadeem. Consumer does want to read when something is available. अब जो हमारे अनफॉर्चुनेटली जो हमारे प्राइवेट स्कूलिंग सिस्टम्स हैं जहाँ पर एंड दीज आर व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट प्राइवेट स्कूल्स वी टॉक अबाउट पीपल हु हैव बाइंग पावर। तो कोई भी आप अपनी अगर चिल्ड्रन पब्लिशिंग प्रोग्राम बनाएंगे तो आप गवर्नमेंट स्कूल के बच्चों के लिए नहीं बनाएंगे क्योंकि दैट विल नॉट मेक यू एनी मनी, द गवर्नमेंट विल नॉट बी इंटरेस्टेड इन बाइंग एनीथिंग फ्रॉम यू। So all you can do is go to private school where people have some buying power and sell something to the kids, and of course not by force, by free choice कि भाई ये चीजें interesting है तो आप खरीदें। तो उसमें मैं आपको बताऊं, I'll just give you an example. I published this first children's book in Pakistan, Tick Tick, The Master of Time. Or within 6 months, we sold about 3,000 copies of that book. India, with all its big, huge distribution market and with a wide readership, जिसके सारे reviews वहाँ के भी अखबारों में भी आ रहे थे, यहाँ पे भी आ रहे थे, but they had a proper distribution system. They had bookshops. They have a reading public. Guess how many copies they sold in the same period? 3,000. So there is a. This was just in Pakistan. It was just direct marketing. Going to schools, telling stories, asking kids if they find the story interesting and buying it. Now these kids, if you give kids stories at an early age, I did a project for UNESCO in which we found out, this was a pilot project done in government school in Muzaffargarh, or usme we found out that if you give kids something interesting that they want to listen to, बच्चों ने जब वो कहानी हम सुना के चले गए तो हमने डब्बे रखवा गए थे। यूनेस्को had bought a number of stories from us and they were stored in schools, in the school storage. बच्चे उसके अंदर स्टोरेज में चले गए और तोड़ के वो ताला खोल के वो अंदर चले गए and they read all those stories. उसके बाद जब उन्होंने पढ़ ली वो स्टोरी, क्योंकि वो सुन चुके थे स्टोरी को, अब उनको पता था कि इसको they wanted to relive that experience. उसके बाद उन बच्चों ने जाके अपने मोहल्ले के बच्चों को सारी कहानी सुनाई। उसके बाद उन्होंने जाके अपने अम्मा पापा को सुनाई। उसके बाद उन्होंने उन्हीं कहानियों का पंजाबी वर्जन और सराइकी वर्जन बना के एक दूसरे को सुनाना शुरू किया। So this is telling us that we have a society, we have children who are children, still who are children, जिनको अगर आप किसी प्रॉपर प्रोसेस से, किसी प्रॉपर मेथड से कहानियों से इंट्रोड्यूस कराएंगे, they will develop a reading habit, they'll become readers for life. ये जो बच्चे यूनिवर्सिटियों के अंदर हैं, they are not, I do not look at them as somebody I could put some effort in and change. I look at young kids जिनको मुझे पता है कि कहानी को अगर उनको मजा आ जाएगा, उसके बाद दूसरी कहानी चाहिए होगी, उसके बाद उनको तीसरी। This is how I
यानी कि आप कह रहे हैं कि before you've lost your innocence, you're fascinated by stories and books. After you lost your innocence, तो आप जनाब बन जाते हैं स्टैंडर्ड। शंदाना बेबी, मैं लोगों के घरों में जाता हूँ, बड़े बड़े लोगों के घरों में, वो कहते हैं स्टडी में आ जाओ या लाइब्रेरी में आ जाओ। जब मैं स्टडी और लाइब्रेरी में जाता हूँ, मैं देखता हूँ किताबें कोई नहीं है, या किसी ने कॉस्मेटिक किताबें मंगा के रखी हुई जो पता चलता है कि सिर्फ दिखाने की रखी हुई है। तो मैं तो फिर भी आप लोगों से थोड़ा सा इस पे कंटेस्ट करूंगा, इवन दो आई नो आई लूज, कि डिमांड कहाँ है आप लोगों की? आप लोग, आई थिंक यू आर एंजॉयिंग योरसेल्फ, और आप लोग इसलिए हमें तंग कर रहे हैं, पर डिमांड कोई नहीं इस सोसाइटी में बुक्स की। जी शंदाना बीबी।
Nadeem साहब, I'm beginning to be seriously concerned about the sort of people you spend your time with. आप ना जाएं ऐसे घरों में जहाँ किताब में cosmetics हैं. I think कि ये मेरे साथ भी हुआ है. People have asked me that, why your children readers and my children are not readers, and it's a very simple answer. आप फोन पकड़ के बैठी हुई हैं, मैं किताब पकड़ के बैठी हुई हूँ. I mean, monkey see, monkey do. So this is another problem. If you yourself don't read, why do you expect your child to read? And why are you expecting strangers, which is your teachers or your government, to teach your children how to read? So so I think that's not our responsibility. Second, as a writer, again, it's not my responsibility to make a reader. Readers are made by a curious alchemy, just as writers are made. And if I started out, and I have spent years as a teacher, so I think that teachers can help spark a love for reading as well as parents, but it's not the writers who have to enter your homes and turn your children into readers. I also wanted to, I totally forgot what I was going to say now, which is why you shouldn't entrust serious matters about how to formulate policy to writers, because our brains are not, made that way.
No problem. You can enter whenever you like. This is just regarded as just a conversation. We are not doing anything here, but trying to talk to people to understand. लोग अपने अपने हाथ खड़ा कर दें जो भी सवाल पूछना चाहता है. Please, let's make it as animated as possible.
Can I make a
please,
quick presentation
absolutely.
about?
Go ahead.
I'm going to share the screen.
Please do.
This is the Getz Pharma Library for the Classics that we have launched, and the idea of this is about creating demand, creating outreach, creating something to do with books. Or its purpose kya hai iska, to bring focus on literary classics as an important part of our literary heritage. Heritage की बात तो लोग समझते हैं कि अच्छा भाई ये तो कोई zombie है या कोई embalmed वो कोई creature है. But no, these are very lively stories. They speak to us at the present moment. और दूसरी चीज है to develop awareness about our stories and widen their readership through outreach. उसके लिए क्या करना है उसके लिए देखते हैं. To build a market for literature जिसकी आप बात कर रहे थे. To provide content for performing arts and entertainment industry. आप अगर नई अच्छी कहानी देंगे लोगों को तो वही 3-4 लोग जो आपके टीवी को पॉपुलेट कर रहे हैं उन्हीं के फरसुदा एक कहानी चलती रहेंगी. एक और चीज important thing I'll just briefly mention is the limitation of existing learned bodies publishing classics. यहाँ पे scholars होते हैं लेकिन उनको इस काम पे लगा दिया जाता है कि आप पेपर खरीद के लाएं उधर से और वो किताब छाप कर उधर पहुंचाएं. They are not publishers, they are scholars. So their purpose should be to produce content and make it available to private publishers to buy, क्योंकि ये तो गवर्नमेंट फंडेड चीज है ना, तो आपका काम है कि लिटरेचर की प्रिजर्वेशन आप इसको कीजिए, but let private publishers license it from you and publish it. After 3 years, somebody can have an exclusive license for 3 years, and after that make it open for any publisher who wants to do it, because the whole idea is to promote it. The activities that we are planning to do are the public lecture series, storytelling workshops in schools and colleges, translation workshops, because these works are Urdu as well as available in English translation, editing workshops, and a guide to classical literature that will bring us some awareness of what kind of classics we have had. These are some of the books that we have already published. First title is Qissa Sipahi Zada. It's about down on luck soldier जिसको ठग लूट लेते हैं और उसके बाद फिर उनसे अपना बदला लेता है. The Ingenious Farkhanda, Qissa Shahzadi Farkhanda का another very lively tale. We have The Victim of Malice. This is what you would call advisory literature. कि दुनिया में आपको क्या काम करना चाहिए, क्या नहीं करना चाहिए, किसके क्या consequences होते हैं. This is about that. It's like Ayyara का The Adventures of a Trickster Woman. And it's of Azar Shah Samanrukh. This is the one I was telling you about, जिसके अंदर उसको क्योर किया जाता है through storytelling. और आखिर में छबीली भटियारी, छबीली the Innkeeper, which you'll be seeing in the coming days on thing. So these are some of the books that we have published, and these are we are trying to create a market for our classics, for stories, not agenda driven, not aiming to push any kind of thing. These are just stories which were the beloved stories of our earlier generations, and they are very contemporary. I will send you a copy, and you can maybe purchase a set for PIDE yourself.
Inshallah, we will. Absolutely, we will. There's no question about that. We will. But Meher Bibi, ye bataiye, one question that I have for all three of you is I think one thing that the state can do, which it hasn't done, which would support you a lot. एक चीज जो हमारे मुल्क में मेरे लिहाज से बड़ी अजीब बात है कि we have no public libraries. मतलब एक आधा गिनती चुनती किया है, शायद पंजाब पब्लिक लाइब्रेरी पड़ी हुई है, but we really have no क्या कहते हैं पब्लिक लाइब्रेरीज इन द कंट्री, जो नेबरहुड में लाइब्रेरीज हो, जो सब जगह लाइब्रेरीज हो. तो अगर लाइब्रेरीज हो तो हम क्या कहते हैं बच्चे पढ़ना सीखेंगे, लाइब्रेरी में बैठना सीखेंगे वगैरह वगैरह. तो कैन वी हैव, डू यू थिंक दैट विल हेल्प योर पब्लिशिंग इंडस्ट्री अगर हमारे पास लाइब्रेरीज हो, और एम आई barking up the wrong tree?
No, definitely. I think libraries, public spaces, that can certainly help. The idea is to get work to the people. And if public libraries is the way, then I think that's a wonderful idea. I do feel, however, on the part of the publishers, that whatever content that we create, you see, Pakistan has a very young population. I mean, you're referring to university students as children, as some of them may well be. The point is that whatever is being created by publishers, it has to connect with the current crop of youth, the current generation. And one way of doing that is definitely by public accessibility, where people get to meet authors, they get to meet publishers, a dialogue can be created where we can at least ask them, what is it that you want and what is it that you would like to read, to get an idea of what is it that people want. It's a two-way thing, it's a two-way street. So yes, public spaces, especially libraries, would certainly help.
तो एक तो पब्लिक लाइब्रेरी हो गई, दूसरी मुझे अभी तक समझ नहीं आई कि गवर्नमेंट की सपोर्ट जो आपको चाहिए है, व्हाई डोंट वी हैव पब्लिशर्स कोऑपरेटिव्स? डू यू गाइस cooperate with each other? Is there a publishing industry that shares information?
No,
तो वहाँ क्या?
I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Earlier this year, I organized a Women in Literature Festival for South Asia and the Minhas region. It was the first of its kind. And we had women of all ethnicities, of all religions, all backgrounds from all over the world come together to talk books. And I'm all for collaboration. I'm all for partnerships. I do genuinely feel that publishers need to come together to forge a way forward. Once we are on the same platform is when we can start lobbying the government. Definitely.
May I jump in here briefly?
Please jump in, Shandana.
So yes, absolutely. I'll echo what Meher said. And actually, Musharraf is sort of central to this axis, because when I started my small press in 2016, it was Musharraf who basically taught me what I needed to do to get it off the ground. And that's something that I think we've all paid forward. And he has for a long time also been mooting the idea of, particularly the smaller publishers, getting together and utilizing our already scanned resources, and for example, collaborating on things like design, distribution, etc. That's one thing. The second thing I wanted to address was your question about what sort of support is needed in practical terms from the government. And so the first thing is from what I remember, the process of getting an ISBN, which is an identity number that you need to publish a book, happens at the Islamabad Central Library, and it's quite a cumbersome, a paper-driven process that can be simplified drastically, and that would really help publishers. The second thing, you'd asked about cash on delivery and direct sales earlier. So when I started, I actually used the Pakistan Postal Service. Again, on Musharraf's advice, it was, I hope he's very pleased with himself, because I cannot tell you how difficult that was. Yes, so we've done all of those things that are available to us. So very basic structures in this country do not work. So they exist on paper, but they don't exist in reality. So if somebody, not writers, but actually the people being paid to, keep those things alive, did that, that would be great. Teesri baat, Pakistan Academy of Letters ki. Pakistan Academy of Letters needs a drastic overhaul. Like everything else, look, what is called the creative industry in Pakistan is as subject to the ravages of corruption and nepotism as any other place. And you will find the cultural establishment in Pakistan is completely stuffed full of sifarshis, whether that is, your hoity-toity English-speaking elite literature festivals and their juries and their et cetera, or whether that is the Pakistan Academy of Letters, or whether that's some small, place. So, हाँ, safai karni hai to sabki safai kare na. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say.
Amen. Amen, Shandana. And yes, I have to give credit to Musharraf Saab, who also advised me on how to set up a publishing platform.
देखिए जी, ये सब बातें सही हैं आपकी, बट एक चीज है मुशर्रफ साहब, आप लिट फेस्ट कराते हैं. लिट फेस्ट डजंट सीम टू बी इन पाकिस्तान एट ऑल. लिट फेस्ट तो सिंध क्लब, पंजाब क्लब का होता है, बाकी तो दुनिया उसमें होती ही नहीं. तो क्या आप लोग खुद अपने पैर पे कुल्हाड़ा मार रहे हैं कि सिर्फ आप लोग एक खुद साइलो बना रहे हैं, क्लब बना रहे हैं, या कि हम दूसरों को भी इंक्लूड करते हैं?
देखिए, लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल्स, अगर आप उसको ये देख रहे हैं कि उसको कौन लोग उनको स्पॉन्सर करते हैं, क्या होता है?
नहीं, स्पॉन्सर नहीं, जो उसका कंटेंट होता है मुशर्रफ साहब, कंटेंट. स्पॉन्सरिंग छोड़ दें, स्पॉन्सरिंग तो अमीर लोग ही करेंगे. कंटेंट जो होता है,
देखिए, जो कंटेंट है इंक्रीजिंगली, अब आप किसी भी लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल में चले जाएं और उसमें सारी वही पॉलिटिकल बहस चल रही होती है जो आपके टीवी पे दिन रात चल रही होती है, बिकॉज समहाउ दैट सीम्स टू अट्रैक्ट मोर ऑडियंस. या वो चल रही होती है, या कोई फक्कड़बाजी, फक्कड़पन की कोई बात हो रही होती है, उसके अंदर लोग आए बैठे होते हैं. तो there's a problem with the curation of literature festivals. That's one thing. लेकिन आप ये देखिए कि लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल्स की अच्छी बात ये है कि दे आर ओपन टू एवरीवन. कोई भी जा सकता है वहाँ पे, कम से कम आप जाके सुन तो सकते हैं. ये भी आपको मैं बताऊं कि, और एंड दिस इज नॉट जस्ट ट्रू ऑफ पाकिस्तान, दिस इज ट्रू ऑफ इंडिया एज वेल, कि किताबें लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल्स में नहीं बिकती हैं. किताबें अगर आपको बिकती देखनी है तो आप बुक एक्सपो पे चले जाएं, कराची के चले जाएं, आप लाहौर के चले जाएं, एंड यू सी द ह्यूज नंबर ऑफ पीपल हु कम and the huge number of sales that they get. क्या बिक रहा है वहाँ पे, उससे पता नजर हम ये देख रहे हैं कि किताबों की सेल हो रही है वहाँ पे. अच्छी बुरी सारी, अच्छी छपी हुई किताबें, बुरी छपी हुई किताबें सारी बिक्री होती है. लेकिन जो I think any tool to bring focus on literature, whether it's a literature festival, whether it's a talk show on TV, whether it's a kind of public lecture series, उसका हो सकता है कोई फौरी आपको फायदा नजर नहीं आएगा, यार इसको बंद कर दो, ये तो नहीं होना चाहिए, इसको कोई फायदा नहीं है. लेकिन these are all things which feed, which bring a which broaden the platform for writers, for publishers, for the literary industry, and I think they should be welcomed.
देखिए, ये बात आपने जो कह दी कि लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल होना चाहिए, मैं तो मानता हूँ, मैं नहीं कहता उसको रोकना चाहिए, बट खुदारा अगर पाकिस्तान में हर जगह डिबेट वही होगी जो टीवी पे होती है, तो then we are all regressing to the same lowest common denominator. अगर हम वहां जा रहे हैं, मैं जी,
मेरा ख्याल है 1 साल के लिए हर किस्म के पॉलिटिकल पैनल्स को बंद कर देना चाहिए लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल में, जस्ट एज अ स्टेटमेंट कि बहुत हो गया है.
तो अगर आप लोग सारे नहीं इसको कर सकते, तो हम बेचारे इकोनॉमिस्ट तो किसी गिनती में नहीं है, हम कहाँ आएंगे? अगर आपकी किताबें 500 बिकती, हम इकोनॉमिस्ट की 10 भी नहीं बिकती, ठीक है, तो हम तो बहुत ही बेचारे,
आपकी तो काफी बिकी हैं,
हम तो बेचारे बिल्कुल फाड़ी कॉर्नर में बैठे हुए हैं, ठीक है ना. तो आई नो, बट पॉइंट ये है कि वो आपकी मेहरबानी थी, मेरी तो किताब कभी नहीं बिकती, पीआईडी में हमारी किताब कोई नहीं बिकती. तो मसला इज, आई थिंक इट्स अ वेरी डीप इशू जो हम फेस कर रहे हैं. मेहर बीबी, बहुत डीप इशू है कि क्या करें.
मेरे ख्याल से नदीम साहब, आई थिंक लाइक आई सेड दिस ईयर एंड सिंस लास्ट ईयर, जिस तरह की किताबें निकल रही हैं पाकिस्तान में, वो बहुत फर्क तरीके की हैं, और वो सिर्फ, जिस तरह मैंने शुरू में कहा था, सिर्फ सियासी या स्ट्रेटेजिक लेंस से नहीं आ रही, वो हर मौजू पे आ रही हैं. It's just a matter of visibility and reaching out to the authors and the publishers who are publishing them to come forward and talk about them. There is a disconnect. You see, there's a disconnect on multiple levels. There's a disconnect on a generational level. There's a disconnect topic-wise. There's a disconnect in terms of readership. There's a disconnect all over. I mean, I have seen Musharraf Farooqi का काम जिस तरह है, वो शांदाना साहिबा से फर्क है, जो मेरा काम है, इन दोनों से फर्क है. बात आ जाती है कि जी, आप एक प्लेटफॉर्म होना चाहिए जहाँ पे हम सारे आ सकते हैं, जहाँ पे हम सब अपना काम आगे कर सकते हैं, अपने ऑथर्स को कर सकते हैं. एंड वही वजह थी लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल की, जो मार्च में हुआ था इस साल. आपने शायद ना देखा हो, लेकिन उसकी मार्केटिंग पीआर काफी हुई थी. And it brought forward many new voices, new books, which was fantastic to see. It was just unbelievable to see कि ये काम भी हो रहा है. सो आई थिंक एक प्लेटफॉर्म जरूरी है जहाँ पे, जैसा आपने दुरुस्त कहा कि पब्लिशर्स को आना चाहिए, लेकिन ये कहना है कि जी नया मटेरियल नहीं है, या वही स्ट्रेटेजिक लेंस है, या इकोनॉमिक लेंस है, या पॉलिटिकल लेंस है, ये तो फिर आपके इंटरेस्ट की बात आ जाती है ना। अपनी तरफ से तो हम पूरी कोशिश कर रहे हैं।
तो ये एकेडमी ऑफ
नदीम
लेटर्स क्या है? ये एकेडमी ऑफ लेटर्स
नदीम आप
शंदाना भी बार-बार कहती है, जरा मुझे बता दे शंदाना, एकेडमी ऑफ लेटर्स क्या है? मुशर्रफ, प्लीज टेल मी व्हाट दिस एकेडमी ऑफ लेटर्स इज. I don't know anything about it. I've seen the phatta, but I don't know what it does.
They've just released, they're setting up a museum of writers. Musharraf Saab, Shandana Saab, if you're interested. I've not been contacted. Maybe you will have better luck with it.
I'm ready for it.
Actually, I was part of the executive committee of the ministry before which this proposal was presented. और उसके अंदर the funny thing was कि मैंने उनसे ये कहा, मैंने कहा कि देखिए जो लिविंग राइटर्स हैं उनकी आप नहीं लगाएं, उससे पहले हमारे बहुत सारे राइटर्स हैं who should be remembered और who should be commemorated in a way. लेकिन there are some Islamabad based writers who are connected with the bureaucrats, उनको पार्टिंग शार्टिंग चल रही होती है, तो सबसे पहले उनको अपना उसकी फिक्र होती है कि हमारा मुजस्समा वहाँ पे लग जाए, हमारी तस्वीर लग जाए। तो एक तो मैंने कहा कि देखिए जो लोग बहुत ज्यादा एक्टिवली इसको पुश कर रहे हैं कि मेरा लग जाए, उनको तो बिल्कुल नहीं लगना चाहिए। लेट कमिटी ऑफ राइटर्स डिसाइड कि किसका लगना चाहिए, किसका नहीं लगना। एंड सबसे अच्छी बात ये है कि आप अगर सिर्फ the condition should be that you should be deceased, so there's no interest, nobody gets anything out of putting somebody's mujassama, no bureaucrat and no pork being obtained by anyone. तो लेकिन इन बॉडीज का ये लर्नेड बॉडीज हैं और अब इनका बन गया है कि चूंकि there is a fund which the previous government had set up for promoting literature, for promoting heritage, both archaeological as well as historical. तो अब सब अपने proposals बना के ला रहे हैं कि जी हमको इसके लिए पैसे चाहिए, हमको इसके लिए पैसे चाहिए, और उसके अंदर then it becomes के अच्छा भाई वो चलो भाई वो फलाने साहब बैठे हुए इस्लामाबाद के अंदर एकेडमी ऑफ लेटर के हेड, उन्होंने इससे बात करके ब्यूरोक्रेट जो उसको चला रहा है अपने लिए इतना मंजूर करवा लिया इससे पहले कि वो कमेटी में डिबेट के लिए वो चीज आए। तो I've seen these things और it's a very loosely let's say very loosely regulated, very loosely decided things जिसका जो दिल चाहे कर रहा होता है। So yes, पाकिस्तान एकेडमी ऑफ लेटर का ये काम नहीं है कि बैठ के अपने मुजस्समे लगाए या किसी की तस्वीरें लगाए या किसी के लिए टूम्बस्टोन्स लगाए। उनका काम होना चाहिए to encourage research, to provide facilities for writers, researchers, academics, कि जो आपकी libraries हैं उनका अगर आपको कोई manuscript चाहिए, किसी चीज पर रिसर्च करनी है तो provide easy access. Maybe they can charge us a small membership fee कि आप इसके ले लें, उसके बाद all these resources are open to you. Writers bodies होती हैं हर जगह पे, तो उनको ये काम करना चाहिए, लेकिन their focus has been turned away क्योंकि उनको बताया गया है कि आपको profitable होना है। A learned body should not be run as a profit-making organization, क्योंकि उससे उसका मकसद सारा फौत हो जाता है। This should be the focus, not in profit-making, but on generating research, on encouraging research, on creating possibilities and opportunities for writers.
मेरा ख्याल है ये तो फिर वो हमारी जो एक क्लासिक इकोनॉमिस्ट की बात है कि एवरीथिंग दैट द गवर्नमेंट टचेस टर्न्स टू डस्ट, ये वो वाली बात है। तो मेरा ख्याल एकेडमी और लेटर्स बंद ही कर दे तो बेहतर नहीं है। जी खदीजतुल कुबरा वांटेड टू आस्क समथिंग। खदीजा बोलिए।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर, मेरे दो सवाल हैं। एक तो एक तो पैनल से मैं ये पूछना चाहती हूँ कि ये जो आपने डिस्कनेक्ट की बात की, मैं बहुत एग्री करती हूँ इस बात से कि हाँ डिस्कनेक्ट है, बट ये जो और दूसरी बात ये कि वो डिस्कनेक्ट इस सूरत में मुझे नज़र आता है कि ये जो हम बच्चे होते हैं तब हम स्टोरीज पढ़ते हैं वो, और स्टोरीज आपकी क्यूरियोसिटी को करती हैं ट्रिगर, तो क्या इस क्यूरियोसिटी में कहीं हम बच्चों को साइंस सिखाते हैं, कहीं हम उनको क्रिएटिव थिंकिंग सिखाते हैं, क्योंकि मैं बड़ी हुई हूँ स्टोरीज पढ़ते हुए, फिर हमने क्या किया कि हमने डाइजेस्ट पढ़ना शुरू कर दिए। तो वो जो क्यूरियोसिटी है ना साइंस और इससे रिलेटेड, मुझे लगता है वो मिसिंग है हमारे सिस्टम में। और दूसरी बात मैं ये इन्फॉर्म करना, मतलब पता नहीं इन्फॉर्म है ये क्या है, मैं बिलोंग करती हूँ सेंस से, ठीक है। यहाँ पे जो पब्लिशिंग हाउस है वो क्या करते हैं, वो राइटर्स को रॉयल्टी देना तो बहुत दूर की बात है, वो उनसे पैसे चार्ज करते हैं कि आप 50,000 दें तो हम आपकी 500 कॉपियाँ छापेंगे। उसके बाद उनको सिर्फ उनके सिवाय नाम के और कुछ नहीं होता किताब में। और ये मैं नाम भी ले सकती हूँ, ये लाइक रोशनी पब्लिकेशन है या पीकॉक है, या ऐसे बहुत सारे हैं। वो मेरी एक दोस्त है, उसने ट्रांसलेशन की थी इसकी 40 रूल्स ऑफ लव की इन सिंधी में। तो पहली बार जो है पब्लिशर ने तो सिर्फ उनका सिर्फ नाम लगाया। दूसरी बार जब वो कर रहे हैं तो वो कह रहे हैं कि हम आपसे, मतलब तब भी दूसरी बार एडिशन भी जब आ रही है तब भी वो उनको कह रहे हैं कि हम जो है सिर्फ आपको 5 या 10 कॉपियां देंगे, इससे ज्यादा उनका रॉयल्टी देने का कोई असूल ही नहीं है। तो यहाँ ये हशर होता है राइटर्स का।
जी, अगर मैं एक हिस्से का जो उनका सवाल था उसका मैं जवाब दे सकूं कि साइंस लिटरेचर वगैरह हमारे यहाँ बहुत होता था until I've seen until 1960s 1970s बेशुमार किताबें बच्चों के लिए लिखती थी on scientific subjects, on subjects such as geography, history, with a with an international focus. अब वो चीजें नहीं रही। लेकिन साइंटिफिक लिटरेचर को आपको रीइंट्रोड्यूस करना है तो आप उसके साथ साथ, यानी हम ये नहीं कह सकते कि इस चीज को बंद करके दूसरी चीज शुरू कर दो, बिकॉज दैट्स वेयर द प्रॉब्लम लाइज। आप कीजिए, आप बच्चों के लिए साइंटिफिक लिटरेचर, आसान चीज ये होगी कि अवेलेबल जो बच्चों की किताबें हैं साइंस में, चाहे अंग्रेजी में चाहे किसी और जुबान में, उनको उर्दू में या किसी आप सिंधी में पंजाबी में तर्जुमा करके उनको बच्चों को से इंट्रोड्यूस किया जाए। तो ये काम किया जा सकता है in addition to stories.
Hello everybody. My name is Abbas. I just wanted to thank you all for being with us. I'm going to take over from Dr. Nadeem. He's had to run off to a meeting. I had just a couple of questions. So first of all, my question is how new media technologies are sort of altering the dynamics. A lot of my friends who are sort of in their 20s, let's say, who are aspiring writers, they don't get any opportunities, and so they join, let's say, the development sector, and they join some communications department there, and that's how they explore their creative energies, creative interests, and so on. Some of them become bloggers. Some of them have a presence on websites like Substack, for instance, Medium. How are these sort of dynamics altering the dynamics of the industry? Some of them also become columnists for sort of news organizations like Dawn, Express Tribune, and so on. Are these viable revenue streams for writers, especially young writers?
May I take that first?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think the idea that a writer must be published early in one's life is a relatively recent one. I think that writing is a lifelong apprenticeship, and that is the way it has been through the centuries. So this idea that somehow you have to be published or have achieved a certain kind of recognition is a new thing, and it has nothing to do with writing and everything to do with the idea of celebrity. So I would put that to one side. My advice to anybody who's young and wants to be a writer is, okay, so good luck with the rest of your life, because that's really what it is. It's a life's work. It is not a function of a decade. Second, column writing, can that be a revenue stream? Well, again, it depends on what language you're writing in and who you're writing for. To be an English language columnist in Pakistan is basically, in my opinion, unless they're paying you very well, which is exceedingly unlikely, really a waste of time. And it becomes a case of preaching to the converted and building your brand. So in that respect, having your name out there, that can, and if you're writing nonfiction, that can be valuable. Whether to be a blogger. So I think, the idea of creative writing is, again, a recent idea. Creative writing is not the same as storytelling. And blogging is not the same as storytelling. So again, these have to, and I sort of feel that we are mixing up a whole bunch of different things. So.
Musharraf, would you like to comment on that?
देखिए, एक तो revenue generation from an activity is a tricky thing. तो अगर आप ये कहते हैं कि कोई शख्स अब सारी चीजें छोड़ के सिर्फ लिख रहा है और उससे रेवेन्यू जनरेट करना चाह रहा है, तो I will say कि that person has to be really careful about क्या लिख रहा है और what are the possibilities, and I will probably tell that person to have another source of income and not rely on writing as something that will sustain even a very minimum kind of lifestyle. दूसरी चीज ये कि जो I completely agree with Shandana कि ये जो चीज है कि अच्छा भाई अब लिख दिया, अब इसको फौरन छप जाना चाहिए और अब वो फौरन शेयर हो जाना चाहिए और अब फौरन प्रेज हो जानी चाहिए. So there is a lot of this which is agreeable. I mean, I don't have any problem with that. कि आप कीजिए, छापिए, लेकिन it does not इससे अगर आप समझते हैं कि if it helps you be the person that you are, then by all means do it. लेकिन उसका कोई उस पर अगर आप कोई वो बनाना चाहेंगे, कोई इकोनॉमिक मॉडल, और फिर आप शोर मचाएंगे कि ये चल नहीं रहा, तो वो मेरे ख्याल में थोड़ी सी जाती होगी. लगाते हैं इंस्टा पे, अपना हम भी लगाते हैं, ट्विटर पे शेयर कर ली, फेसबुक पे शेयर कर ली, बट there are limits to that.
We have some questions from the floor. Naveed Zafar wants to say something.
Sir, I have one question, that in the era of this technology, we are talking of the number of copies. We are not talking of the downloads it had, the views it has. So why are we restricting only on the print media, or why not the voice copies of the literature which is available, which is more easy to download and not so much to spend on to produce it? इसके ऊपर कुछ आप अगर बताना चाहें तो.
I think, again, if I may start off, that's a good question. And the answer has to do with business models. So in traditional publishing, which is how I was published, and until Musharraf took control of his own work, I think how he did it, and I'm not sure about Meher. When you sign a contract, you give a publisher rights to publish your book in print, and also often as the ebook. And audiobook rights are something completely different. All of those are subject to different terms, none of which the writer has any control over. The writer basically is the worst off in this entire transactional model of traditional publishing. And we are the last to know, we are the last to get money. We often don't know our own figures for downloads, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that Pakistan has a flourishing illegal EPUB download market, like it has a flourishing piracy market. Now, for obvious reasons, those numbers are completely invisible to all of us.
We have a question from Mahmood. Please go ahead.
Hello, am I audible? Yes, before, it is very interesting discussion and relating to economy. Right now, I am in China, and from economic point of view, here in China, there is a lot of practical flourishing market of translations. And in translation, it is amazing. I have been for more than 8 or 10 years. That I still remember 15 years ago, the 1984 book of George Orwell was not even allowed, or to be very difficult to procure in English. but after a gap of 10-15 years, I can see that that book is available now in translation and easily. So from that point of view, because Urdu generation is there, Musharraf Farooqi Sahib is here. He has regenerated the Dastan Goi, the traditional stories. So how do we look toward that enhancing the economic angle? Because I'm working in Pakistan consulate, so many people have contacted us that they want the people from Pakistan to connect with them, and then they can publish mutually related books related to culture. And as Shandana and other, Ms. Mahar has mentioned that the multiple topics are being studied. So I would like to, people are welcome that if they are interested, that if we can move towards Urdu translation to Chinese, there are many people who are interested and we have very good relationship, but there is disconnect, one thing. And second is that just yesterday I got a query that if it is possible, an online platform where Urdu can be taught to the Chinese people. So in that, Musharraf Farooqi Sahib is a big name in Urdu language, and he, if he's interested, we can connect and do that. So I would love to know that why we haven't been able to get into the Chinese market through translation. Thank you very much.
महमूद साहब बहुत शुक्रिया आपका, आपने इन चीज़ों के बारे में हमको बताया ऑफ म्यूचुअल इंटरेस्ट फ्रॉम द चाइनीज साइड। पाकिस्तान में उर्दू में बहुत सारा अदब ट्रांसलेट हुआ था चाइनीज, लोक कहानियाँ खास तौर पर, और कुछ नॉवेल भी। दिस वाज डन some 20 years ago, and I acquired the license of a lot of those stories from people who had translated it. Or this could be a project that you can propose from the Pakistan embassy where you are based. कि हम Chinese publishers को बता सकते हैं कि we will publish X number of folk tales from China, and they can do something like that for Pakistani literature. So this will be a mutually beneficial thing. Building relationships, building literary consciousness of each other. लेकिन और इसके लिए हमारे पास बहुत सारा स्पेड वर्क, ग्राउंड वर्क हुआ रखा हुआ है। जो लैंग्वेज की आपने लैंग्वेज कोर्सेज की बात की, that is not something that I am an expert at, और लेकिन उसके लिए मैं आपको लोगों से कनेक्ट करवा सकता हूँ who can help facilitate that. जी.
Thank you, Mr. Saab. Mr. Saab, did you have another presentation? If you do, feel free to go ahead.
It was just a small presentation about Story Kit, which is something that I would like to briefly discuss.
Sure.
Or I'll just bring it up. So this is Story Kit. इसके अंदर can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So this is Story Kit. ये बच्चों के लिए कहानी होती हैं, और इन कहानियों के साथ एक गेम होता है, और इन कहानियों को सुनने के लिए साउंड क्लाउड पे हमारा QR कोड के जरिए आप इसको उसका नरेशन एक्सेस कर सकते हैं। और this was the program that we did. We piloted in मुजफ्फरगढ़, जिसकी मैंने बात की थी। और आपको कुछ कहने की जरूरत नहीं, आप सिर्फ बच्चों के चेहरे देख लें जिस दिलचस्पी से कहानी को सुन रहे हैं। और इधर ये मैंने पूरी एक्टिविटी बेस्ड लर्निंग, पूरी रिपोर्ट हमने लगाई हुई है। इसमें सिर्फ एक स्कूल नहीं है, इसके अंदर हमने 20 स्कूल कवर किए थे, और इसमें से कोई तकरीबन 8 स्कूलों के हमने केस स्टडीज, सक्सेस स्टोरीज वहाँ पे लगाई हुई हैं, इंक्लूडिंग videos, including images, including reports from both teachers और बच्चों का. इससे आप अंदाजा लगा लें कि यूनेस्को की जो हेड थी रिबेका जॉनसन, I sent this particular picture to her from the field on the day we had finished, after we had finished this storytelling session. और उन्होंने कहा कि this is the first time he has seen children laughing and smiling on any kind of education intervention that they have done. So this is the power of stories. और ये बच्चे कैसे रीडर नहीं बनेंगे, ये बच्चे उनको कैसे ये चीज याद नहीं रहेगी. आपको मैं हमेशा लोगों से बहुत सीधा सा सवाल करता हूँ कि आप को याद है कि आपने कभी स्कूल में कोई शख्स आया था और कोई टीचर आया था, उसने कोई कहानी आपको सुनाई हो. एवरीवन सिट्स अप और कहते हैं हाँ वो 18 साल पहले ये हुआ था कि हमारे वो फलाने टीचर ने आके फलानी कहानी सुनाई. तो ये आपको और किसी चीज और किसी मेमोरी के साथ और किसी इमोशन और किसी चीज को आप इतने इमोशनली और इतने आप मेंटली एंगेज नहीं होते जितनी पावर ऑफ स्टोरीज होते हैं कि हाँ उसने उस दिन आके हमको फलानी कहानी सुनाई थी. तो दीज आर सम ऑफ द थिंग्स व्हिच आई विश टू शेयर. तो दिस वाज लाइक अ स्मॉल. बाकी जब कोरोना हुआ था तो हमने एक कोरोना क्रंचर के नाम से एक गेम बनाया था, बट दिस इज गेमिफाइड इंफॉर्मेशन ऑन बेसिक हेल्थ सेफ्टी. इसका ऑनलाइन गेम भी लगा हुआ है फॉर विच IBM स्पॉन्सर्ड अस, IBM पाकिस्तान. They developed the game for the bigger version from what we had given them. और यहाँ पे बहुत सारी ऑडियो स्टोरीज लगी हुई हैं. You are welcome to listen to them. यहाँ पे जो कि पोदने ने बदला दिया, पोदने पोतनी की कहानी, तो यहाँ पे आप सुन सकते हैं. दिस इज आवर चैनल विच वी स्टार्टेड, द यूट्यूब चैनल फॉर स्टोरी किट, जो हमने स्टार्ट किया था जब शुरू में पेंडेमिक के दिन थे. स्टोरी टाइम विद स्टोरी किट, बच्चों को कहानी सुनाने का. दिस इज एक्चुअली अ चाइनीज फोक टेल, सुनहरी मछली, अगर महमूद साहब अभी बात हमारी सुन रहे हो. और दिस इज ऑल्सो अ चाइनीज फोक टेल, ए सन फरामोश अजदहा. और ये मेरी अपनी कहानी है. इस तरह की बेशुमार कहानी है हमने इसके अंदर, which are both folk tales as well as some original tales, जो हमने इसके अंदर लगाई थी. So these are some of the activities that we are doing, trying to get children interested in reading, whether it's listening to stories or interacting. This is all we can do at a small scale, but we'll be happy. We are always very happy to collaborate with others.
Very nice. I think it's a brilliant idea, actually. Sir, do share the links to these with me over email, and I'll circulate it internally for sure. For sure. Definitely. And that also reminds me, as you were just going through those slides, are there any prospects for writers to maybe apply for grants from foreign donor agencies and so on, maybe pitch an idea and get funding through those means? Is that like a viable sort of a thing? Maybe Ma'am Shandana, if you'd like to comment on that.
Sure, but before we start asking whether we can pitch foreign agencies for funding, we should ask whether we can pitch the Pakistan Academy of Letters for grants, for example. Yes, there are many opportunities for writers abroad that they can avail of. I myself did a residency at the University of Iowa, the International Writing Program. I was invited to be a resident there. And after that, I became part of an alumni network, which enabled me to apply for a small grant, which I, in collaboration with another Pakistani writer, used to bring 2 Indian writers to Pakistan to conduct writing workshops with university students. So those opportunities exist. I wish that I had been able to do that with funding from local organizations, but funding from local organizations remains inaccessible. And again, I would reiterate that your average writer is not temperamentally or suited to applying for grants. Grant writing is a kind of writing in itself. It requires a vocabulary and an astuteness that a lot of us simply do not have. So yes, I think that another thing that might be considered for anybody listening who wishes to develop initiatives that would help develop Pakistan's creative industry is local residencies. Local residencies, simply between languages, for example. I write in Pakistani English, Musharraf writes in Urdu, Meher, I think, speaks fluent Saraiki as well. There are so many wonderful languages in our country, each of which has their own unique heritage and practice. And so if a writer from one could be a resident in another language or be translated, I mean, this is where a national governing body would become relevant and should act.
For sure. I think with if there were sort of a platform for something of that sort, wouldn't it be sort of a little bit restricted in terms of the ideas that they would accept? Wouldn't there be sort of like strings attached to everything that they entertain, for instance, especially
Yes,
like
absolutely.
in Pakistan?
Yeah, there would be. But you know what? Nothing worth having is possible without a fight.
For sure, for sure. I think we had a question from Meher Zaidi, if she's still with us.
Ji, I'm here. Thank you for such an interesting session and seen Shandana, Musharraf Saab and Meher Hussain. My question is very basic because I've tried everything. I tried to create a literary club in Baraku, Banigala area. I had several hundred books, which finally I donated to NAST and other libraries because nobody was interested in literary activities. I hosted festivals. I hosted book launches on my own. I spent my own money. But my question is, because I'm a poet and sort of a writer also, I'm writing Urdu short stories now. My question is, we never speak about censorship. Now, there are so many things we are not able, a writer is not able to write in Pakistan, especially in the Urdu language. And so many topics have become taboo. And since I'm a doctor, basically, so my interest was writing in Urdu, creating health awareness. So I was sort of, I'm writing my stories in Urdu, short stories, and creating awareness through that. But the language I have to use and the words I have to use. So I think Mr. Musharraf would be more be able to talk about censorship and writing, and especially in the Urdu language in the current scenario.
जी मेहर साहबा, सेंसरशिप हमेशा रही है और हर सोसाइटी में किसी न किसी नौइयत की सेंसरशिप होती है, लेकिन उर्दू में हर तरह की चीज़ें छप रही होती हैं, ये भी है। और अभी तक मुझे यानी कोई, अगर आप कहें कि रोज़ाना कोई 3 या 4 किताबें बैन हो रही हैं, तो ऐसा नहीं है। कोई बहुत कम इंस्टेंसेस में होता है कि समटाइम्स फेदर्स आर रफल्ड एंड उसके नतीजे में वो एक्शन होता है जो भी इंटरेस्ट ग्रुप्स होते हैं। लेकिन आप अगर हेल्थ अवेयरनेस, बेसिक हेल्थ सेफ्टी वगैरह की बात कर रही हैं, तो आई एम श्योर यू कैन present the idea to somebody at publishing house, to education publishing karte ho, maybe that's one way for you to reach a publisher. Most of my work is जो हमारा एक लिमिटेड सा स्कोप है चीज़ों का, उसमें अगर हम कोई देखते हैं कि कोई चीज़ बच्चों के लिए हम पहुंचा सकते हैं उनको, या किसी चीज़ की हमारे पास कोई रिक्वेस्ट आती है किसी प्रोग्राम डेवलप करने की, तो उसके हिसाब से कर देते हैं।
Musharraf, are you familiar with Folio Books? Bilal Zahoor is the founder of that. He's actually a friend of mine. They seem to be doing something very new and very refreshing. It's almost like a diamonds in the rough sort of situation where they seem to be putting out ideas that would generally be considered extremely controversial in a place like Pakistan. I'm reading Amar Ali Jan's new book these days, if you're familiar. A lot of very controversial ideas in that book, but they seem to be selling his book very well these days. And a bunch of my other professors from LUMS have been publishing with Folio Books. If you're familiar with them, can you sort of like shed light on some of the things that they're doing that
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with their operation.
Ma'am Shandana, do you know about Folio Books?
I've heard about Folio Books, but again, I'm afraid I haven't read anything from them. But I am interested in this idea that you raise on ideas that are very controversial. What would you consider a controversial idea? Because we actually have an incredible heritage of resistance and expression. So I'm curious to see what they're doing. What are you referring to specifically that has not been said before in any of our languages?
I mean, I guess like ideas that would be a little bit, this is also controversial a little bit.
Are you censoring?
But like sort of like related to religion, related to, you know, politics, even some areas of politics are sort of very no-go areas, for instance, like sort of left-leaning politics, revolutionary politics, things of that sort. Generally, if not controversial, then very sort of like no-go areas, generally speaking, in the sense that they'll tend to elicit the kind of backlash that might put you in a dangerous spot. So it's not like formal censorship, but the dangers that are associated with something like that. So can you guys talk about a little bit about the culture, this sort of restrictive culture around the writing process, around creative pursuits, generally speaking, in Pakistan?
So again, and I'm a bit, I realize that I've said this several times during the conversation. I like to be clear what exactly is being discussed, because I do think that the correct and precise use of language can be a balm to a wound. I think there's a difference between fiction and nonfiction. And a fiction writer's approach to the world and a fiction writer's view of the world is different from nonfiction writers and what is dominant in nonfiction. What has happened globally in the last 10, 15 decades is a rise of nonfiction. As a fiction writer, I have watched this from afar. So I'm afraid I'm not conversant with global trends and those things. I don't know, Musharraf, have you been following nonfiction a lot?
No, I studiously avoid all nonfiction. Whatever I must read, I mean, I do read a lot of nonfiction, but the kind of देखें, सीधी सी बात ये है कि in the society we live in, आपको पता है कि क्या चीज़ अच्छी है और क्या चीज़ बुरी है, और उसके लिए मुझे किसी नॉन फिक्शन ट्रीटाइज पढ़ने की ज़रूरत नहीं है कि भाई ये एक चीज़ आई है और इसको आप पढ़ें तो आपकी कुछ ज़िंदगी बदल जाएगी. Maybe there is such a thing, but unfortunately I'm too busy with those things to change my life at this part, at this time in my career. और हमेशा मैं ये कहता हूँ कि अगर कोई आपके सामने उछल के कोई आना चाह रहा है किसी वजह से, or trying to attract focus in a particular way, there's always something driving that. So I would advise caution in this sort of thing. अगर और फिर आपने बात की कि पाकिस्तान में सेंसरशिप है लेकिन कुछ लोग बहुत ही खतरनाक काम कर रहे हैं, तो अगर वो सेंसरशिप है और वो खतरनाक काम कर रहे हैं तो वो महफूज क्यों है अभी तक? ये मुआवजा कैसे हो रहा है? तो क्योंकि आपको पता है कि कोई जरा सी बात होती है और फलाने को उठा के ले गए और किसी ने कुछ मुंह खोला फलाने को उठा के ले गए, लेकिन एक प्लेटफॉर्म है उस पर आप कुछ भी कह रहे हैं और आपको आराम से आपस पे बैठ के बात कर रहे हैं, and this doesn't make sense to me.
One more question I had, and maybe we can wrap up then. This is about the education system of Pakistan. How do you think we can sort of restructure the education system, especially at the primary school level, to facilitate reading from a young age, to develop an interest, like in an organic way, maybe in the mother tongue even, so that we can facilitate like this culture of discourse, of exchange, of ideas, and so on?
I think that we have to let children be children, and that we should let children have a life of the body. I think we should have education that is in various languages. I didn't go to school till I was 5 years old. I grew up between Haque, which is in interior Sindh, Hyderabad, and Karachi around that age. I was taught Sindhi, Arabic, Urdu, and English. These are my early years. And while I did not pursue all of those languages, the basics of that, of a truly vibrant, syncretic soup that I was swimming in, sort of stayed with me. And until we can replicate it, then we're going to be in trouble. And the best way to do that is through stories, because children will listen to stories. Children act out stories. We understand the world through stories. I can't agree with Musharraf enough, and I love the story kid thing that he's doing. And everyone should be doing things like that.
Yeah, especially with the SNC and everything that's coming out these days, I feel like we're headed in a direction that might be even more sort of restrictive. So I'm very pessimistic about this whole situation, to be very honest. Musharraf Saab, do you have any comments on the education system?
I deal with the education system from time to time, and fortunately for me, I have the choice to work with people who I admire, and there is a support system from schools who value the kind of work we are doing. बाकी तो जिस तरह दूसरी चीजें यहाँ पे चल रही हैं, यहाँ पे एजुकेशन सिस्टम भी चल रहा है और उसको अब बाकायदा एक तरीके से उसको स्टंटेड बनाया जा रहा है. तो ठीक है, मुबारक हो सब लोगों को जो ये काम कर रहे हैं और जिनके ईमा पर ये काम हो रहा है.
Yeah, I agree. And just before we close, I'd just like to ask, like, if you guys have any advice for aspiring writers who are sort of just starting off, what would you say to aspiring writers in Pakistan?
मैं तो कुछ नहीं कहूँगा.
Exactly. Yeah. Bilkul.
Shandana, do you have
I
anything?
completely agree with Musharraf.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
They have
This
enough
has been
problems
a
already.
tremendous. Right. This has been a tremendous conversation. I'd like to thank all of you. I think Meher has gone, but her as well. This has been very insightful, and we will definitely stay in touch. And thank you again for taking out the time.
Thank
we
you,
appreciate
Basa.
it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Khuda Hafiz.